My parents hired a lawyer to bankrupt me in public. The judge asked one question that ended them. My name is Meredith Lawson, and I am 32 years old. Right now, I am standing inside a courtroom in Atlanta, Georgia, staring at my own mother and father, sitting across from me with the most expensive attorney in the city. They are smiling. They look so confident, so certain they are about to destroy everything I have built with my own two hands. My father has not looked at me once since I walked in. My mother dabs at her eyes with a tissue playing the victim as always. And my older brother Gregory sits behind them smirking like he has already won. But here is what they do not know. I am not afraid anymore. I have nothing left to lose from them. Before I tell you how we got here, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if stories about family betrayal and fighting back resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Trust me, you are going to want to stay for what happens next. Because everything my family thought they knew about me was about to be proven wrong. I grew up in a beautiful house in one of the nicest neighborhoods in Atlanta. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. My father, Douglas Lawson, was a successful commercial real estate developer. He owned office buildings and shopping centers all over Georgia. People respected him. People feared him. And he made sure everyone in our family knew that his money was the only reason any of us had anything. My mother, Patricia, had worked at a bank before she married my father, but she quit as soon as they got engaged. She became completely dependent on him for everything. And somewhere along the way, she lost the ability to have her own opinion about anything. Whatever Douglas said was law. Whatever Douglas wanted happened. She never questioned him, not even when she should have. Then there was my brother Gregory. He was 3 years older than me and had been groomed since birth to take over the family business. Gregory was arrogant, competitive, and deeply insecure underneath all his bravado. He needed constant validation from our father, and he saw anyone who got attention as a threat, including me. From the time I was a little girl, I was different from what my family expected. They wanted a daughter who would study law or finance, someone who would eventually work in the family company and help expand the empire. But I loved art. I loved colors and textures, and creating beautiful spaces. When other kids were playing video games, I was rearranging my bedroom furniture and begging my mother to let me pick out new curtains. My father thought this was ridiculous. He called my interests a waste of time. He said artists were losers who could not make real money. Every time I showed him a drawing or talked about design, he would wave his hand dismissively and change the subject to Gregory and his latest achievements. I remember one birthday when I was 12 years old. I had spent weeks working on a painting for my mother. It was a watercolor of our backyard garden with the roses she claimed to love so much. I put it in a frame I bought with my allowance and wrapped it carefully in tissue paper. When she opened it at her birthday dinner, she barely glanced at it before handing it to our housekeeper. She told her to put it somewhere out of the way. She said the colors clashed with the living room. I watched the housekeeper carry my painting toward the garage. I did not cry at the table, because I knew my father would call me dramatic. But later that night, I locked myself in my bathroom and sobbed until my chest hurt. I was 12 years old, and I already understood that nothing I created would ever be good enough for them. Despite everything, I worked hard in school. I got good grades. I was determined to find my own path, even if my family did not support it. When I was 17, I applied to the Savannah College of Art and Design. It was one of the best art schools in the country, and I was thrilled when I got accepted with a partial scholarship. The day the acceptance letter arrived, I ran into my father's home office to show him. I was so excited, so hopeful, that maybe this time he would be proud of me. Instead, he grabbed the letter out of my hands, read it once, and then tore it in half. He threw the pieces in the trash and told me I was not going to waste my potential on a useless degree. He said I would go to Emory University and study law just like Gregory had. He said if I chose art school, I would be on my own. No money, no support, no family. I looked at my mother hoping she would say something, but she just stood in the doorway with her arms crossed staring at the floor. She did not defend me. She did not even look at me. That night, I made a decision that changed my life. I decided I would rather be on my own than spend another day trying to earn love from people who did not know how to give it. I spent the entire summer working 3 different jobs. I waited tables at a diner in the mornings, worked retail at a clothing store in the afternoons, and babysat for neighbors in the evenings. By August, I had saved enough to cover the part of tuition my scholarship did not pay for. I bought a bus ticket to Savannah with my own money. The day I left, nobody came downstairs to say goodbye. My father was in his office with the door closed. My mother was upstairs claiming she had a headache. Gregory stood at the top of the stairs and laughed. He told me he would see me back home in a year when I failed. I dragged my suitcase out the front door and walked to the bus stop in the rain. I was 18 years old, completely alone and terrified. But I was also free. And I promised myself that I would never go back to that house asking for anything ever again. 4 years later, I graduated from SCAD with honors. I had worked part-time jobs throughout college, made the dean's list every semester, and completed an internship with a prestigious design firm in Charleston. On graduation day, I stood on the stage in my cap and gown, looking out at the crowd of families cheering for their children. My family was not there. They had not even sent a card. I watched other parents hugging their kids, taking photos, crying happy tears. I watched siblings high-fiving each other, and grandparents beaming with pride. I had none of that. But I told myself this was just the beginning. I would build a life so beautiful that their absence would not matter anymore. I had no idea how wrong I was. After graduation, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina to start my career. I rented a tiny studio apartment above a bakery, and the smell of fresh bread every morning became my daily reminder that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I got an entry-level job at a small interior design firm, making barely enough to cover my rent and groceries. But I was happy. For the first time in my life, I was building something that was mine. Those first few years were hard. I took the bus 2 hours each day because I could not afford a car. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches more often than I care to admit. I worked 12-hour days at the firm and then came home to study for my certification exams at night. Sometimes I was so tired I fell asleep at my tiny kitchen table with my textbooks open in front of me. But I never complained. I never felt sorry for myself, because every struggle was a step toward the life I had always dreamed of. When I was 24, something happened that changed everything. I met Eleanor Whitfield. Eleanor was 72 years old and had been running her own interior design business in Charleston for over 40 years. She was legendary in the local design community, known for her impeccable taste and her refusal to compromise on quality. When her longtime assistant retired, she needed someone to help her manage her remaining clients as she prepared to close her business and retire. I applied for the position expecting nothing. Eleanor had interviewed dozens of candidates, many of them with far more experience than me. But something clicked between us during my interview. She said she saw something in my eyes that reminded her of herself when she was young. She said I had hunger, I had drive, and most importantly, I had taste that could not be taught. Eleanor became the mentor I never had. She taught me everything about running a business, from managing client expectations, to negotiating with vendors, to handling the financial side of things. She introduced me to her network of suppliers and contractors. She showed me how to spot quality materials and how to avoid the cheap imitations that so many designers use to cut costs. When Eleanor finally decided to close her doors after 43 years in business, she called me into her office. She said she had a proposition for me. She wanted to sell me her client list and her vendor relationships for a fraction of what they were worth. She said she trusted me to carry on her legacy. I cried. I actually cried right there in her office. Nobody had ever believed in me the way Eleanor did. Nobody had ever looked at me and seen potential instead of disappointment. At 26 years old, I founded my own company. I called it Lawson Interiors. Despite everything my family had done to me, I kept the name because I wanted to prove that the name Lawson could stand for something more than cold ambition and conditional love. My first client was a young couple who had just bought their first home together. They had a modest budget and big dreams, and I was determined to make their vision come true. I worked around the clock for 3 weeks straight. I painted walls myself to save them money. I drove to estate sales and flea markets to find unique pieces within their budget. I even assembled furniture in their living room because the delivery company wanted to charge extra. When I revealed the finished design to them, the wife burst into tears. She said it was more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. And then she told me she was going to tell everyone she knew about me. She kept that promise. Within 6 months, I had more clients than I could handle. Word of mouth spread through Charleston's close-knit community, and soon I was being hired by some of the most prominent families in the city. I rented a small office downtown. I hired my first employee, then a second, then a third. By the time I was 30 years old, Lawson Interiors was one of the most sought-after design firms in Charleston. I had a team of 4 full-time employees, a portfolio of stunning projects and clients who trusted me completely. I bought a small house near the beach with a garden full of roses. I bought the car I had dreamed about since I was a teenager. And most importantly, I had finally achieved financial independence. I had built everything myself. Every dollar, every client, every success was mine. I owed nothing to anyone, least of all my family. But then something unexpected happened. My mother called. It was a random Tuesday afternoon in September. I was reviewing fabric samples in my office when my phone rang with an Atlanta area code. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. Patricia's voice was soft and trembling. She said she had been thinking about me a lot lately. She said she regretted how things had ended between us. She said she missed her daughter and wanted to try to rebuild our relationship. I was suspicious. More than a decade of silence. And suddenly she wanted to reconnect. But there was something in her voice that sounded genuine. She was crying. She kept apologizing. And despite everything, part of me still wanted a mother who loved me. I agreed to come to Atlanta for dinner. I told myself I would keep my guard up. I would be careful. I would not let them hurt me again. The dinner was at my parents' house in the same dining room where I had spent so many miserable meals as a child. But this time felt different. My father was warm and attentive. He asked about my business and actually listened to my answers. He complimented my success and said he was proud of what I had accomplished. Gregory was friendly and funny, making jokes that actually made me laugh. And my mother kept reaching across the table to hold my hand, telling me how much she had missed me. I started to believe that maybe people could change. Maybe 12 years apart had given them time to grow. Maybe we could actually be a family again. During dessert, I made a mistake that would nearly cost me everything. I told them about my upcoming projects. I talked about a contract I was negotiating to redesign a boutique hotel on King Street. I mentioned that the project was worth $250,000 and would be the biggest job of my career. I did not notice the look that passed between my father and Gregory when I said that number. I did not see the calculation in their eyes. I was too busy feeling grateful that they finally seemed to care. I drove back to Charleston that night feeling lighter than I had in years. I thought I had my family back. I was so wrong. 2 weeks after that dinner, my father called me with an offer I could not refuse. Or so I thought. Douglas told me that his company had recently purchased an old office building in downtown Atlanta. It needed a complete interior redesign, and he wanted me to handle the project. The contract would be worth $400,000, making it the largest job in my company's history by far. He said he wanted to keep it in the family. He said he trusted my abilities. He said this was his way of making up for all the years he had not supported my career. I was overwhelmed. Part of me was still cautious, still remembering all the times he had dismissed my dreams. But another part of me desperately wanted to believe that my father had finally seen my value. Maybe this was his awkward way of apologizing. Maybe this was the beginning of a real relationship. I flew to Atlanta the following week to meet with his legal team and sign the contract. The meeting was held in a gleaming conference room on the top floor of my father's office building. Everything was polished and professional. There were pastries and expensive coffee. Everyone smiled and shook my hand warmly. The lawyer handling the contract was a man named Victor Harrington. He was around 50 years old, with silver hair and a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than my first car. He had an easy smile and a confident handshake. He explained that the contract was standard boilerplate, nothing unusual. He walked me through the main point scope of work payment schedule timeline deliverables. The contract was 30 pages long. I started reading through it, but Victor kept interrupting to summarize each section, assuring me that everything was routine. My father sat across the table nodding along and occasionally making small talk. Gregory was there too, scrolling through his phone and looking bored. I should have read every single word. I should have taken the contract home and had my own lawyer review it. But I trusted them. They were my family. Why would they try to hurt me? I signed on the dotted line. Victor shook my hand again and congratulated me on what he called the start of a beautiful partnership. That handshake was the beginning of my nightmare. I threw myself into the project completely. This was my chance to prove myself not just to my family, but to the entire Atlanta design community. I wanted the finished space to be so stunning that everyone would know Lawson Interiors was capable of handling projects at the highest level. I mobilized my entire team. I brought on 3 additional contractors to help with the scope of work. I flew back and forth between Charleston and Atlanta every week, sometimes twice a week. I spent hours researching the latest trends in commercial design, studying successful office renovations around the country, and sourcing the finest materials I could find. The building required custom millwork, so I commissioned pieces from a master carpenter in Asheville. The lighting design needed to be state-of-the-art, so I partnered with a specialist from New York. The flooring was imported marble from Italy. Every detail was carefully considered, every choice made with intention and excellence. I also advanced $70,000 of my own money to ensure the project stayed on schedule. Some suppliers required deposits, and the payment terms with my father's company were net 30, meaning I would not receive reimbursement until 30 days after submitting invoices. I did not think twice about it. This was family. The money would come. After 3 months of intense work, I completed the first phase of the renovation. The designs were approved. The installations were proceeding smoothly. Everything was on track. I submitted my invoice for the first payment, $120,000, exactly as outlined in the contract. 1 week passed, then 2, then a month. No payment arrived. I called my father to follow up. He said he was in back-to-back meetings, but would handle it soon. I called again a few days later. He did not answer. I sent emails to the accounting department at his company. Nobody responded. I texted Gregory, who left me on red. Something was wrong. Finally, I decided to fly to Atlanta without warning anyone. I needed ANSA, and clearly nobody was going to give them to me over the phone. I walked into my father's building and took the elevator to the executive floor. His assistant tried to stop me, saying he was in a meeting, but I pushed past her. I opened the conference room door without knocking. Gregory was sitting at the table with 2 people I did not recognize. One was a middle-aged man in a cheap suit, and the other was a young woman with a tablet open in front of her. Spread across the table were blueprints and design boards, my blueprints, my design boards. But the logo in the corner had been changed. Instead of Lawson Interiors, it said Sterling Design Group. Gregory looked up when I walked in. He did not look surprised. He did not look guilty. He just smiled that infuriating smile and said, "Oh, little sister, you are early for the bad news." My mind raced. I demanded to know what was happening. Gregory leaned back in his chair and called for our father. A few minutes later, Douglas walked into the room with Victor Harrington close behind. My father did not greet me. He did not ask how I was. He just handed me a manila folder and told me to read it carefully. Inside was a letter from Victor's law firm. It cited Clause 14B of the contract I had signed, which stated that any designs, drawings, or creative work produced for the project became the sole property of the client. Every design I had created, every innovative solution I had developed, every custom element I had specified belonged to my father's company. Completely, legally. But that was not the worst part. The letter also cited Clause 22C. This clause stated that if any defects or deficiencies were discovered in the work, the contractor would be liable for damages up to 3 times the contract value. And according to the letter, their engineers had discovered multiple serious defects in my designs, structural issues, safety hazards, code violations. The letter concluded with a demand. My father's company was suing me for $1,200,000 in damages. The amount was designed to do one thing: destroy me completely. I looked up at my father. He was watching me with cold eyes. Patricia had appeared in the doorway, her face pale, but her expression unreadable. Gregory was grinning like he had just won the lottery. I asked my father how he could do this to his own daughter. He straightened his tie and said, "This is not personal, Meredith. This is business. You should have read the contract more carefully." I walked out of that building feeling like someone had reached into my chest and crushed my heart with their bare hands. I do not remember driving back to my hotel. I do not remember checking out or flying back to Charleston. The next thing I clearly remember is sitting on my bathroom floor at 2 a.m, staring at the wall and trying to understand how my own family could betray me so completely. For 2 days, I did not eat. I did not sleep. I did not answer my phone or check my emails. I just sat in my dark living room, replaying every moment of the past few months. Every smile from my mother, every compliment from my father, every friendly joke from Gregory. It had all been an act, a performance designed to make me trust them just long enough to destroy me. On the third day, my business partner, Sarah, let herself into my house with the spare key I had given her for emergencies. She found me on the couch, still wearing the same clothes from 3 days before, surrounded by empty water bottles and uneaten food that had gone cold. Sarah sat down next to me and did not say anything for a long time. Then she took my hand and told me we needed to fight. She said she believed in me and she was not going to let them win. Her words broke through the fog. I realized that wallowing in self-pity was not going to save my company or my reputation. If I wanted to survive this, I needed to act. I showered, changed clothes, and ate my first real meal in days. Then I started making phone calls. The first 2 lawyers I consulted gave me devastating news. They reviewed the contract and told me that the clauses were ironclad. My father's legal team had crafted the agreement specifically to trap me. Both attorneys said I could fight it, but the chances of winning were slim and the legal fees would be astronomical. I was about to give up when Sarah mentioned a lawyer she had heard about named Diane Crawford. Diane was 55 years old and specialized in commercial contract disputes. She had a reputation for being brilliant, tenacious, and particularly skilled at finding weaknesses in supposedly airtight contracts. I called Diane's office and managed to get an appointment for the following day. When I walked into her office, I was exhausted and terrified. But Diane took one look at me and told me to sit down and start from the beginning. I told her everything: the estrangement from my family, the sudden reconciliation, the contract I had signed without reading carefully, the designs they had stolen, the lawsuit they had filed. Diane listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she asked to see the contract. I handed her my copy, and she spent the next hour reading every single page. I watched her expression carefully, looking for any sign of hope or despair, but her face remained neutral. Finally, she looked up and said, "Your father's lawyers are good. This contract was designed to be a trap, but they were arrogant. They made mistakes." My heart leaped. I asked what she meant. Diane explained that while clauses 14b and 22c were harsh, they were not as bulletproof as they appeared. Clause 22c, the damages clause, specified that the contractor was liable for defects, but did not define who had the authority to identify those defects. It did not require an independent third-party evaluation. It did not establish objective criteria for what constituted a defect. Under Georgia law, contract provisions that were vague or one-sided could be challenged and potentially voided. Additionally, Diane pointed out contradictions between different sections of the contract. The scope of work section implied certain quality standards that conflicted with the evaluation criteria in the damages clause. These inconsistencies suggested the contract had been drafted hastily, perhaps because my family was in a hurry to spring their trap before I got suspicious. But Diane said we needed more than legal technicalities. We needed evidence of intent. We needed to prove that my family had planned this deception from the beginning. I thought about everyone who worked at my father's company. Most of them had been there for years and were completely loyal to him. But there was one person who might help. Carla, my father's executive assistant, had worked for him for 15 years. I remembered how she had tried to stop me from barging into that conference room. But I also remembered something else. The look in her eyes when Gregory called me little sister. It was a look of disgust. I did not contact Carla directly. That would have been too risky. Instead, I asked Sarah to reach out through mutual acquaintance. A few days later, an encrypted email arrived from an anonymous address. The message contained a single attachment, a folder of internal emails from my father's company. What I read in those emails shattered whatever remaining illusions I had about my family. The earliest email was dated 2 weeks before my mother called me to reconcile. It was from Gregory to my father, with Victor Harrington copied. The subject line was Sister Project. Gregory outlined a detailed plan to lure me back into the family, offer me a contract too good to refuse, and then use the contract terms to sue me into bankruptcy. He estimated my company's assets and projected that $1 million judgment would not only destroy my business, but also force me to sell my home and liquidate my retirement accounts. My father's response was brief. He wrote, "Proceed, but make sure Patricia's call sounds genuine." There were dozens more emails. Patricia practicing what she would say during the reconciliation call, Gregory researching my client list to estimate my income, Victor drafting the contract clauses, specifically designed to trap me, my mother suggesting the family dinner as a way to make me feel safe and trusting. They had planned every moment. Every hug, every smile, every kind word had been calculated to manipulate me. My own mother had rehearsed her apology before calling me. I sat at my kitchen table with those emails printed out in front of me and cried until I had no tears left. Then I called Diane and told her we were going to war. While we prepared for the court battle, my father launched a second attack. He started spreading rumors through his network of business contacts that Lawson Interiors was fraudulent. He told people I had delivered substandard work and was being sued for malpractice. The lies spread through the design and real estate communities like wildfire. Two of my biggest clients called to cancel their contracts, citing concerns about working with a company under legal investigation. A contractor I had worked with for years suddenly became unavailable. A supplier demanded immediate payment for outstanding invoices, afraid I was about to go bankrupt. My revenue dropped 80% in a single month. I had to dip into my savings to make payroll. One of my employees, a talented young designer named Marcus, came into my office in tears. He said he believed in me, but he had a family to support and could not afford to go down with a sinking ship. I told him I understood and wrote him a glowing recommendation letter. The week before the trial, I received a text message from an unknown number. It said, "Drop the case. You will lose everything, and everyone will know you as a failure. Save yourself the humiliation." I knew it was from Gregory. The smug tone was unmistakable. Something changed in me when I read that message. For so long I had been afraid. Afraid of losing my business, afraid of public humiliation, afraid of proving my family right about me being a failure. But sitting in my living room reading Gregory's threat, I realized I had already lost them. I had lost my family years ago, maybe even before I was born. The people I thought I wanted back were never really mine in the first place. They were strangers who happened to share my blood, people who saw me as a tool to be used or an obstacle to be removed. I had nothing left to lose from them. And that meant I had nothing left to fear. I texted back 2 words, "See you in court." The morning of the trial, I woke up before dawn. I had barely slept, but I felt strangely calm. This was the day that would determine everything. My business, my reputation, my future. All of it hung in the balance. I put on the navy blue suit that Eleanor Whitfield had given me when I started my company. She had called it my battle armor, something to wear when I needed to be my strongest self. Eleanor had passed away 2 years earlier, but I felt her presence with me as I buttoned the jacket and looked at myself in the mirror. Diane Crawford met me outside the Fulton County Courthouse at 8:30 in the morning. She was carrying 2 thick briefcases filled with documents. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression was focused and determined. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Let us end this." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. There were wooden benches for observers, 2 tables for the opposing parties, and an elevated bench for the judge. Everything smelled like old paper and furniture polish. My father's legal team was already there when we arrived. Victor Harrington sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by 2 younger attorneys who looked like they had stepped out of a legal thriller. They were arranging documents and whispering to each other, occasionally glancing at me with barely concealed contempt. Behind them sat my family. Douglas wore a charcoal gray suit and a red tie. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his expression was smug. Patricia sat next to him in a tasteful black dress, clutching a handkerchief and already dabbing at her eyes. Gregory lounged in his seat, scrolling through his phone like he was waiting for a table at a restaurant. When I walked in, Gregory looked up and waved at me, a mocking little flutter of his fingers. Patricia made a show of turning away, as if the sight of me was too painful to bear. Douglas did not acknowledge my existence at all. I took my seat next to Diane and placed my hands flat on the table to stop them from trembling. At exactly 9 o'clock, the bailiff announced the arrival of the Honorable Margaret Sullivan. Everyone rose as she entered the courtroom and took her seat behind the bench. Judge Sullivan was 63 years old with short gray hair and sharp brown eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She had a reputation for fairness, intelligence, and an absolute intolerance for dishonesty. Looking at her, I felt a tiny spark of hope. The proceedings began with Victor Harrington presenting my father's case. He was smooth and confident, painting a picture of a naive business owner who had trusted her family only to deliver shoddy, defective work. He talked about structural problems, safety hazards, and code violations. He showed photographs that he claimed demonstrated my incompetence. He calculated the damages at $1,200,000 and asked the court to hold me accountable. Through it all, I sat with my hands clasped in my lap, forcing myself to breathe steadily. Diane had prepared me for this. She told me Victor would try to make me look like a fool. She said my job was to stay calm and let the evidence speak for itself. When Victor finished, Judge Sullivan turned to Diane. "Your response, counselor." Diane stood up, slowly straightening her jacket. "Your Honor, opposing counsel has presented a compelling narrative. Unfortunately for him, almost none of it is true." She started with the technical arguments, dismantling the contract clause by clause. She showed how the damages provision lacked clear criteria for determining defects. She pointed out the contradictions between different sections. She cited Georgia contract law, establishing that vague or unconscionable provisions could be voided by the court. Then she moved to the evidence of intent. She introduced the internal emails from my father's company, explaining how we had obtained them and establishing their authenticity. She read excerpts aloud: Gregory's original proposal, my father's approval, my mother's rehearsal notes. The courtroom was silent except for Diane's voice and the occasional rustle of papers. I watched the judge's face as she listened, looking for any reaction. Her expression remained neutral, but I noticed her eyebrows rise slightly when Diane read the email where Patricia practiced sounding genuine. Diane called our expert witness, an independent structural engineer who had reviewed my designs. He testified that there were no defects whatsoever in my work. The so-called problems cited by my father's company were either fabricated or represented normal construction variations well within acceptable tolerance. She introduced financial records showing that my father's company had transferred ownership of my designs to Sterling Design Group, the company I had seen Gregory meeting with. They had already begun marketing my work as their own, even before the lawsuit was filed. Finally, Diane addressed the court directly. "Your Honor, this is not a case about defective design. This is a case about a family conspiring to destroy their own daughter. They lured her with false promises of reconciliation. They tricked her into signing a predatory contract. And when she trusted them, they betrayed her in the cruelest way imaginable. We ask this court to see through their deception and deliver justice." She sat down. I realized I had been holding my breath and forced myself to exhale. Victor Harrington stood for his rebuttal. He was less confident now, his smooth delivery slightly rattled. He argued that the emails were taken out of context, that the contract was standard business practice, that my designs genuinely contained serious flaws. But his arguments felt hollow after everything Diane had presented. When he finished, Judge Sullivan sat quietly for a long moment, looking down at the documents in front of her. Then she looked up and fixed her gaze on my father. "Mr. Lawson, please stand." Douglas rose, adjusting his jacket with a confident smile. "Mr. Lawson, I have reviewed the evidence presented by both sides. I have listened carefully to the arguments, and I find myself with one question that I cannot reconcile with your claim of good faith." She paused, and the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. "Can you explain why your company's internal emails dated 2 weeks before your wife called your daughter to reconcile already discussed the exact amount you would sue her for?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Douglas's smile faltered. His face went pale, then red. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at Victor Harrington for help, but Victor was staring at the table, his jaw tight. "Mr. Lawson," Judge Sullivan's voice was like ice. "I am waiting for an answer." Douglas stammered something about internal projections and contingency planning. It made no sense. Victor tried to interject, but the judge cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Counselor, I did not ask you. I asked your client." And his inability to answer a simple question tells me everything I need to know about the credibility of this lawsuit. She turned to my mother. "Mrs. Lawson, were you aware of this plan to sue your daughter before you called her to reconcile?" Patricia burst into tears, dramatic sobs that would have seemed genuine if I did not know better. But she did not deny it. She could not deny it. The judge looked at Gregory, who had finally stopped smirking. He looked scared, like a child caught doing something terrible. "I have seen enough," Judge Sullivan said. "I am calling a recess. We will reconvene in 3 hours for my ruling." Those 3 hours were the longest of my life. Diane and I went to a coffee shop down the street from the courthouse. I could not eat anything, but I drank 3 cups of coffee while Diane reviewed her notes and made phone calls. When we returned to the courtroom, my family was already there. They looked different now. Douglas seemed smaller, somehow deflated. Patricia's eyes were red and puffy. Gregory would not look at anyone. Judge Sullivan entered and took her seat. She did not waste any time. In the matter of Lawson Properties versus Lawson Interiors, I am dismissing the plaintiff's claims in their entirety. The contract at the center of this dispute was designed with predatory intent and contains provisions that are unconscionable under Georgia law. The evidence presented clearly demonstrates that the plaintiff family orchestrated a deliberate scheme to defraud the defendant. She paused to let her words sink in. Furthermore, I am granting the defendant's counterclaim for breach of contract and tortious interference. The plaintiff, Douglas Lawson, is hereby ordered to pay the defendant the full amount owed for work completed $180,000. Additionally, the plaintiff is ordered to pay compensatory damages in the amount of $300,000 for harm to the defendant's business reputation. I heard Patricia gasp behind me. Gregory swore under his breath. Douglas just stared straight ahead, his face completely blank. Finally, Judge Sullivan continued, I am referring this matter to the State Bar Association for review of Mr. Victor Harrington's conduct in drafting and executing a contract designed to defraud an unsuspecting party. She looked directly at my father. Mr. Lawson, in 40 years on the bench, I have seen many cases of family disputes, but I have rarely seen such calculated cruelty. You had every advantage, wealth, legal resources, industry connections, and you used all of them to try to destroy your own child. I hope you reflect on what that says about you as a person. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. I stood there, unable to move. Diane hugged me, but I barely felt it. Behind me, I heard raised voices, as my father argued with Victor Harrington. I heard Patricia crying this time, with genuine despair. I heard Gregory demanding to know how this had happened. But I did not turn around. I did not want to see their faces. Instead, I walked out of that courtroom with my head held high. I stepped into the Atlanta sunshine and took a deep breath of fresh air. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The aftermath of the trial unfolded faster than I expected. News of the verdict spread quickly through the Atlanta business community. A prominent real estate developer being ordered to pay nearly $500,000 to his own daughter for trying to defraud her was exactly the kind of scandal that people could not stop talking about. Within a week, the story had been covered by the local news and several business publications. My father's company suffered immediate consequence. 2 major investors pulled out of ongoing projects, citing concerns about leadership integrity. The bank that held their primary line of credit demanded a comprehensive review of all contracts and financial practices. Gregory was forced to resign from his position as executive vice president after the board of directors decided he was too closely associated with the scandal. Patricia called me 6 times in the 3 days after the trial. She left voicemails that alternated between tearful apologies and angry accusations. She blamed me for destroying the family. She begged me to forgive her. She claimed she had been pressured by Douglas and never wanted to hurt me. I did not return any of her calls. I returned to Charleston feeling like a completely different person. The woman who had left for Atlanta terrified and desperate was not the woman who came home. I had faced the worst thing my family could throw at me, and I had survived. More than survived. I had won. My team threw a small celebration at the office. Sarah had decorated the conference room with balloons and ordered a cake that said "Justice Served" in blue frosting. My remaining employees hugged me and told me they never doubted we would win. I knew that was not entirely true, but I loved them for saying it anyway. The clients who had canceled their contracts started calling back. Some apologized for believing the rumors. Others pretended nothing had happened and simply asked when we could resume their projects. I took back every single one of them. In business, you cannot hold grudges. You have to move forward. 3 weeks after the trial, the payment from my father arrived in my company's bank account. $480,000. I stared at the number on my screen for a long time, thinking about everything that money represented. My father had tried to use money to control me my entire life. Now, ironically, his money would help me build a future completely independent of him. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with part of it. Eleanor Whitfield had changed my life when she believed in me at a time when nobody else did. She had given me the foundation for everything I had built. Now I could honor her legacy in a meaningful way. I established the Eleanor Whitfield Scholarship Fund for students pursuing degrees in interior design at Savannah College of Art and Design. The scholarship would cover tuition supplies and living expenses for students who demonstrated exceptional talent, but lacked financial resource. I wanted to give someone else the chance that Eleanor had given me. The rest of the money went into growing my business. I hired 2 new designers, both incredibly talented young women who reminded me of myself at their age. I invested in better software and equipment. I moved into a larger office space with room to expand. But I also made a personal decision that felt just as important as the professional ones. I wrote a letter to my family, not an angry letter, not a bitter letter, just an honest one. I told them that I forgave them. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved to be free from the weight of carrying anger toward them. I told them that I understood they were incapable of loving me the way I needed to be loved, and that I had finally accepted that their limitations were not my fault. I told them that I wished them well truly, but that I could no longer have any relationship with people who had demonstrated such cruelty toward me. Then I said goodbye. I blocked all of their phone numbers. I blocked their email addresses. I blocked them on every social media platform. I removed every photograph of them from my home. I packed up the few items I still had from my childhood and donated them to charity. It felt like closing a chapter of a book that I had been trying to finish for 32 years. 2 months after the trial, I sold my house in Charleston. I loved that little house near the beach, but it felt like a place connected to a version of myself that no longer existed. I needed somewhere completely new. I moved to Savannah, the city where I had first discovered who I really was. I bought a charming old house near Forsyth Park with a wraparound porch and a garden that needed serious attention. I adopted a golden retriever from a local rescue and named her Maple because her fur was the exact color of maple syrup in autumn sunlight. I also changed the name of my company, Lawson Interiors, became Whitfield Designs, a tribute to the woman who had believed in me when nobody else would. Eleanor had built a legacy of beauty and integrity, and I wanted to carry that forward. The rebrand was a success. Clients appreciated the fresh start and the story behind it. Within 6 months, Whitfield Designs was more successful than Lawson Interiors had ever been. We expanded beyond Charleston and Savannah, taking on projects in Atlanta, Charlotte, and even a few in New York. I hired Marcus back, the young designer who had left when things looked hopeless. He cried when I offered him his old position at a higher salary. He said he had felt terrible about leaving and had been following the news of my case obsessively, hoping I would win. I told him there were no hard feelings. Fear is a powerful thing, and everyone has to make their own choices about how to handle it. 6 months after the trial, I received word that Douglas had suffered a minor stroke. The stress of the scandal, combined with the financial pressures on his company, had taken a toll on his health. Gregory called and left a voicemail asking me to come visit. He said our father might not have much time left and that I should make peace while I could. I listened to that voicemail sitting on my porch in Savannah with Maple curled up at my feet. I thought about my father lying in a hospital bed, afraid and perhaps finally confronting his mortality. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to earn his approval. I thought about the man who had torn up my acceptance letter, who had watched me struggle and never offered help, who had orchestrated a scheme to destroy everything I had built. I did not call Gregory back. It was not about revenge. I did not want my father to suffer. I genuinely hoped he recovered and had many more years to live. But I had made my peace already. I had said my goodbye in that letter. Going back now would only reopen wounds that had finally started to heal. My father recovered from his stroke. His company survived, though significantly diminished. Gregory found a new job at a smaller firm. Patricia continued sending letters that I continued not opening. And I continued building my beautiful life one day at a time. It has been nearly 2 years since that day in the courtroom. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. I still see a therapist every 2 weeks. Her name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and she has helped me understand things about myself and my family that I never could have figured out alone. We talk about attachment styles and childhood wounds and the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Some sessions are difficult. Some sessions feel like breakthroughs. All of them are necessary. One of the most important things I have learned is that healing is not linear. Some days I feel completely at peace with everything that happened. Other days I catch myself crying for no apparent reason, grieving the family I never had, and probably never will. Both of those experiences are valid. Both are part of the process. I have also learned that family does not have to mean the people who share your DNA. Family can be the people who show up for you, who celebrate your victories, and support you through your failures, who love you not because they have to, but because they choose to. My family now includes Diane Crawford, who has become one of my closest friends. We have dinner together every few weeks, and she always makes me laugh with stories from her cases. She says I am the daughter she never had, and I tell her she is the mother figure I always needed. My family includes my team at Whitfield Designs. We have grown to 8 people now, and every single one of them is someone I would trust with my life. We work hard together, celebrate together, and support each other through difficult times. My family includes the friends I have made in Savannah, neighbors who bring over cookies when I am working late, fellow dog owners. I meet at the park with maple artists and designers who share my passion for creating beautiful spaces. And my family includes Eleanor Whitfield, even though she is no longer with us. Her spirit lives on in every project I complete, every young designer I mentor, every scholarship recipient who gets the chance she once gave me. Looking back on everything that happened, I sometimes wonder if my parents' betrayal was actually a gift in disguise. If they had never tried to destroy me, I might never have found the strength to completely break free from their toxic influence. I might have spent the rest of my life seeking their approval, never realizing that their approval was not worth having in the first place. They thought they were taking everything from me. Instead, they set me free. I am sitting on my porch as I finish this story. The sun is setting over Savannah, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Maple is snoring at my feet, tired from our evening walk through the park. The air smells like jasmine from the garden I planted last spring. I do not know what the future holds. Maybe I will fall in love and get married. Maybe I will have children of my own and raise them with all the love and support I never received. Maybe I will expand my company across the country. Maybe I will retire early and spend my days painting and gardening. Whatever happens, I know one thing for certain. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Not because everything worked out perfectly, but because I chose myself. I chose my dreams. I chose my dignity. And I refuse to let anyone, not even my own family, take that away from me. If you are watching this and you are dealing with a family that does not support you, I want you to know something. Their inability to love you properly is not your fault. You cannot make someone appreciate you by working harder or achieving more or trying to be perfect. Some people are simply incapable of giving what they do not have. And that is okay. It is painful, but it is okay. Because you can build a new family. You can surround yourself with people who see your worth without you having to prove it. You can create a life that reflects who you really are, not who someone else thinks you should be. The family you are born into is chance. The family you build is choice. And the choice is always yours. I am so grateful you stayed with me through this entire story. It was not easy to tell, but I hope it helped you in some way. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever had to distance yourself from family members who were hurting you? How did you find the strength to choose yourself? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. This community is built on sharing and supporting each other, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps more people find these videos and reminds me that sharing my truth matters. And if you have not already, please subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss future stories. I have so many more experiences to share, and I want you to be here for all of them also. If you know someone who might need to hear this message, please share this video with them. You never know whose life you might change just by passing along a story at the right moment. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Wherever you are in the world, whatever you are going through, I am sending you strength and courage and love. You deserve people who choose you back. Never forget that. Take care of yourself.